Assalamualaikum and good greetings. So today we'll be watching a video titled Can God Do All Things? Question mark Bible Contradiction number 18. Without further ado, let's watch.
Suppose Bible contradiction. Can God do all things, or are some things impossible for God? Matthew 19 and Luke 18 report that Jesus said, "With man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible." However, Hebrews 6:18 says that it is impossible for God to lie. So why would Jesus say God can actually do all things? I think we need to be rational with this and remember the context of each passage. Jesus is saying this in response to the rich young ruler who approached him. After he leaves, he says to his disciples, "It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God." Craig Keener, in his socio-rhetorical commentary, notes Jesus is using hyperbole for dramatic purposes in order to express how hard it is for someone to get into heaven by their own moral effort. So although getting into heaven is impossible with man, all things in this way, related to the subject at hand, are possible with God. Again, it's about the context. We can't divorce this one verse from the whole passage. For example, when I put my 3-year-old to bed, she sometimes thinks I need to go to bed as well. But I could just as easily say back to her, "Honey, I'm an adult, I can go to bed whenever I want." Any logical person would realize I'm not saying I could stay awake for 30 days straight. The context of my claim clearly denotes I'm simply referring to the subject at hand, namely that I can go to bed anytime within a reasonable time frame after she is in bed. President Obama once said in a weekly briefing,
The point is, America can do anything. Even in times of great challenge and change, our future is entirely up to us.
Yet no one accuses President Obama of saying this means he claimed Americans could perform magic, morph into eagles, or any of a number of other things that are impossible for Americans. Everyone understands this statement as hyperbole within the context of American citizens being able to overcome hardships. So why is it that this statement is understood properly, but then skeptics always have to take Jesus' statements to be ultra
Who is this guy?
literal and throw common sense out the window when dealing with the Bible? The reality is Jesus is simply saying, although getting into heaven on your own moral effort is impossible, within this context of the subject at hand, with God, all things are possible. In other words, all the failures of men can still be overcome through the redemptive work of God. So there really is no contradiction once we understand the context and use some common sense when dealing with the use of hyperbolic statements. As for a philosophical understanding of what it means to be omnipotent, see my video debunking the omnipotence paradox.
Okay, wait. So the point is going back to the original, right?
This is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. However, Hebrews 6:18 says that it is impossible for God to lie.
So, okay, so the first part, he corrected the understanding of when some people want to say that, oh, so this verse means can actually do anything, including lie, for example, right? So he said that, no, you have to take this in context, meaning this doesn't actually literally mean that God can do anything is possible for God, right? But it's within the context. So does it mean that the statement says that God can do anything? It's not true, because it is impossible for God to do certain things, for example, lie. Is that correct? So because if that is correct, because when I say that, I think from my belief or my rational, meaning not as Muslim, but rationally, I would say that it is impossible for God not just to lie, but to die. Many Christians come to me that, what? So you think God cannot die? It is impossible for God to die? And they argue that, no, God can do everything, anything, literally. So many Christians come and argue that God should be able to lie, God should be able to die, etc., right? So that is interesting, because that seems to be contradicting to this video, and I'm not sure most Christians are inclined to which, whether they would say that God can do anything, including die, lie, or no, those certain things that doesn't befit God, that is impossible for God, including lie. Yeah. So what do you think? Because this is interesting, even though it's not really about the contradiction. I can understand taking things into context. I would push, or I would urge everyone to do that with any text, right, including the Quran, the Bible, etc. Yeah, but with regard to this, meaning that the conclusion is The second, meaning the correct understanding of whether God can do anything or not, is the second one, right? Because this one is within the context. It's not all things, but within the context. But this one is actually meaning that that is true. He is accepting or agreeing that something that is impossible for God, for example, lie. So what do you think? Because if you agree with that one, then my argument is die for God is also impossible. So is there any Christian that accept there are some impossibilities or things that are impossible for God, but still believe that die or dying is not one of it? Meaning that if you believe impossible for God to lie, but it is possible for God to die. Interested to know. Thank you for watching. See you next time.